Hello, everyone. I would describe Budget 2025 as steady and reassuring. There was no bad news, which in itself is a great news. Now that we've had time to consume the budget over the last few days and have reasonable understanding of the same, let's deep dive with our expert to understand the finer nuances of Budget 2025. Uh, our guest today is Mr. Harish Krishnan. He's the co-CIO and Head of Equities at Aditya Birla Sun Life AMC. He has over 20 years of experience in both domestic and international markets. He's an alumnus of IIM Kozhikode and a CFA charter holder from the CFA Institute, USA. Thanks, Harish, for joining in and glad to have you back.
Thank you so much, Mega. Looking forward to an interesting conversation.
So, Harish, first things first, how would you rate this budget on a scale of 1 to 10? And what, in your view, are the major hits and the misses?
This budget is similar to many other budgets that we've seen in the last 4, 5 years, which has been the hallmark of the Modi 2.0 budget. And it marks a key departure as well, right? So, what has been the common thread of, budgets from 2018 till 2025 has been that there has been a clear focus on fiscal prudence and to try and convey that message that India is a responsible country, sticking to conventional methods of both fiscal policy, and that needs to give confidence to the external rating agencies. So that is the first key broad thread that they have maintained, and they've gone slightly ahead of that by committing to a 4.4% fiscal deficit, right? So that's been the common thread. The departure has been clearly from the fact that over the course of the last 4, 5 years, the focus has been more on the supply side areas, which is PLI, tax cuts for corporates, getting the investments up and going, getting connectivity up going, trying to reduce any of the hindrances so that productivity moves up. That's been the overarching narrative of the fiscal policy making over the course of the last few years, and which has worked quite well. From a country point of view, in terms of getting macro stability and a longer runway of growth. I think the key departure that they did this time has been that they focused slightly towards the demand side, and which is a big departure in the form of the tax breaks that's there. So I think in totality, it is a budget which is reasonably prudent, maintaining its steadiness. It is also important that this is a budget that is meant also for rating agencies. Do keep in mind that S&P had put us on a catalyst upgrade watch list in May of 2024, and therefore this budget is also aimed at that constituency as much as it is for the citizens of India. And I think in that sense, this has been a reasonably good budget overall.
So, Harish, you also mentioned in the deck that you released for 2025 that this year is all about macros. And you did allude to the fact that, we are kind of on a fiscal glide path and the revised number stands at 4.4%. But as far as economic growth trajectory is concerned, even the economic survey points out that we need about 8% growth over a decade or so to probably the dream of Viksit Bharat by 2047. So do you think we are heading towards that with this fiscal numbers?
See, I think there are three elements. One is being counter-cyclical, which is in the face of a very adverse shock. How do policymakers react, be it on the fiscal side or on the monetary side? Second is stability, and third is growth. Okay, I think over the course of the last few budgets, it has been more focused on macro stability than necessarily growth. And I think that's a very big departure from the rest of the world, where most of the countries globally have gone on to both fiscal kind of stimulus in some form or other, and even when they are overheated, they continue to maintain very high levels of fiscal stimulus. On top of that, some of these economies have also gone in for monetary easing at the same time, right? So in many ways, many of the developed markets are behaving like emerging markets. And you've got an emerging market like India, which is actually behaving very much like a prudent developed market, right? And therefore, I would say that, this is more focused on stability for now. It has not yet got into that drive that, we are going to get into a sustained period of 8% growth. Possibly in their wisdom, I think the runway of growth is what they are more focused on, rather than getting these bursts of activity wherein you get these high highs, but that comes with its own challenges of overheating and inflation, and then you have to cool them out. So I think that has been the overarching framework of fiscal policy. If I can, if I, as an observer from the outside, this is how I would rate it.
Right. So higher highs and lower lows, I think even the government doesn't like that. So now there's a lot of debate among the analysts that, there is probably a shift of, from capex to consumption to capex and consumption. So what's your view on the same?
This is not the first time that the government has raised the slabs, right? So in 2019, we did see a slab going up to 5 lakhs. Then in 2023, we saw it to 7 lakhs. And now, of course, we've seen it to 12 lakhs in terms of the slab for the income tax deductions. Now, a cynical observer can say and think about it that if those revenue forgone and those slab increases didn't really alter the consumption narrative and the growth, what will change this time around so that it is going to change the overall consumption narrative? And so I think, we are market participants, right? So as market participants, we view it with a certain nuance, which is that for the overall economy, is a 1 lakh tax forgone? Can that really bring back the consumption narrative back into its earlier glory? I don't necessarily subscribe to that view. Okay. But when it comes to the markets, I think that this consumption boost matters a lot. So why do I say that? See, this is a consumption which is focused on about 2 to 3 crore filers, right? So therefore, to say that each of these filers get anywhere between a 30,000 rupees tax break to a 1 lakh rupees and more of tax break, and as a household, we are talking of a reasonably large amount, right? Now, most of the listed companies which are there, typically barring say the FMCG and microfinance, are primarily focused on the top 20% of the population. There are very few goods and services that go down the curve below that. Of course, everybody wants to cater to the next wave, but broadly speaking, the Indian consumption market, especially on the listed side, focuses on the top 20%. And it is in this top 20% that these 3 crore filers reside in, right? And therefore, for the markets, this might be actually a very good thing in terms of providing you some benefit of a demand stimulus coming in for these companies. How and where customers are going to spend, etc., is the second order derivative. But so therefore, I think from economy perspective, I'm not so sure that this is going to do the magic trick to get overall consumption back, get its spring back, etc. But for the markets, I would say that this is something meaningful that they've done. Coming to the capex side, see, we've been thinkers of the fact that the government spending has been on the fourth gear for now almost 2 3 years running. Right, it's been the private capex that has to really come through over there. So I would say that having maintained that growth of a double-digit capex growth, I think is all that one can think about and ask for at this point of time, rather than some very elevated numbers. So I would say, therefore, it is not necessarily, this is not a budget that is against capex. Okay. However, from a market point of view and from a portfolio point of view, a lot of money had gone into the investment theme at the expense of consumption theme and the financials themes, which have been marked underperformers over the course of the last 2 3 years. And therefore, from a market point of view, maybe there is a need for a readjustment in terms of the portfolio composition.
You did mention that, 1 lakh crore is not too big a stimulus, and I agree because it would probably be what, 0.3% of the Indian GDP. with the way consumer behavior is evolving, it is very complex. It is gone are the times when you could predict how a consumer is going to behave. But if you were to take a educated guess on what the beneficiaries of this policy are going to do, what in your view could it be? The few things that we could probably think of was that probably they would save more and invest in the capital markets. Second, they could probably borrow more to buy stuff like real estate or auto. Thirdly, they may overspend on consumer discretionary items, or they may foreclose the loans because the retail balance sheet also looks very poor at this point in time. My question to you is, what in your view, probably people are going to use this additional surplus that they get, and if I mean, whether it can actually have any multiplier effect as far as consumption is concerned.
Uh, I think that the starting from the retail balance sheet and the saving point of view that you said, see, my sense is that the weaker set of population which have been exposed to credit are the most vulnerable. It's not necessarily the tax slabs of say 7 to 12 lakh, which are necessarily loaded with too much of debt. Of course, India is a vast country. Will we find some set of population which is also there? Quite possible. So I'm not really of the camp that we've got into a very very over leveraged kind of a balance sheet at the top of the cycle or at the top of the pyramid. Okay, the top 10-15%. Maybe yes, from 85 to 80% can there be some kind of a deleveraging cycle that can happen? Quite possible. What we think, and as you rightly said, it's a very complex topic. Forecasting consumption habits is as much a folly as forecasting markets. That there are very complex nuances that go through. But we think that when we are talking about a 30,000 to a lakh rupees of savings, and primarily coming to the salaried workforce, which means that if they apply to the new tax regime on a monthly basis, they are going to get seeing that. So it is not that they're going to get one big check at the end of the year or something wherein they're going to okay. So to our mind, therefore, the real high ticket consumption today looks highly unlikely. Saying that, am I going to buy a 20 lakh or a 30 lakh car, because of this, or can I buy a real estate because of this? I'm not so sure. Okay. But can I enjoy, let's say, if I was to do a holiday of, say, 7 days, can I make it to an 8 day or a 9 day holiday with this? It's quite possible that one can think about, right? Or let's take about, say, services and entertainment, and let's say, for example, liquor. I mean, do you want to premiumize and celebrate your happiness, with this? It's quite possible that one can make that leap. Again, whether they do it or not is anyone's guess. So I would say it is fitting into that bill of, say, consumer durables. It fits into the bill of some retailers, some apparel, some amount of travel, entertainment, aviation spends. It could be some amount of premiumization, maybe having a good time, a liquor, or going out. See, it's also important to realize that as one goes higher the income level, the percentage that gets spent to services tends to become much, much more compared to what you spend on goods. And therefore, one needs to be thinking about where else can they be spending. So, can they be spending on, say, a Netflix and Amazon Prime? I'm just giving an example. Can the entertainment spends go up slightly more? Now, these are the ways in which companies will have to think about as to how they're going to. Of course, there is also the fact that, for a lot of them who have been very, very conservative and fiscally prudent, financially prudent, they may want to use this extra savings to further improve their overall savings profile and to invest in markets, because that's becoming a reasonably established trend. So, can we see a lot more money coming into the SIPs? Can we see it into, say, direct equities? It's quite possible to believe that that connection can also come through. So yeah, these are the broad areas that we think, can see some rub-off benefit. Also, do keep in mind that let's say that out of 1 lakh crores, people spend say 75,000 crores, a ballpark, right? Now, given the fact that they're going to spend 75,000 crores, and most of the spending in this cohort is going to be at the 28% GST slab. Okay, so we're talking about close to about a third of that money going back to the government in some form or the other. So it isn't that it's a complete tax revenue foregone. And then obviously, if you're going to services, my sense is that in services the multiplier effect is a lot more than in goods, because a lot of goods require these basic commodities, these basic things, which either come from outside. There is only the value add of the trade component, etc., that comes through. But when you go into the higher end goods or into services, there's a lot more value add that gets captured out here, which improves the multiplier effect of that. So, if I spend, let's say, 10,000 rupees more on a holiday, can that 10,000 rupee go into somebody else who may also want to spend something more on their services? And that brings in that multiplier effect, which can come through. So, yeah, it's a complex thing, but net, I would say that there is a small bump up in demand that can definitely come through.
Totally understand, Harish. And we can relate to you because, being a fund manager and extrapolating the behavior of masses is very, very difficult. We're just doing a dipstick at our home with our friends on what they would end up doing with this extra tax saving. And the answer ranged from, hiring an extra help to increasing the frequency of salons or to invest in cryptocurrency. So human behavior is very, very complex. And with the options of spending increasing so much, it's very difficult for any one of us to predict how the consumption will pan out. So, Harish, my next question is a little macro in nature, not just for this year, but for next few years. And the reason why I'm touching upon this is because we often claim that India's huge or the biggest strength is demographic dividend. But we feel that some part of it is not being capitalized because the employment opportunities have not been created in India commensurate to the dividend which we have. Now, my question is that if you look at last budget in July, there were a lot of skill enhancement measures which were announced by the government. And this time around also, there were certain announcements which were done. So how do you see unemployment number panning out over the next few years, keeping in mind last two budgets of this government?
Look, I think this is a massive work in progress that one budget or one policy will not be able to address the huge imbalance that we have got a significant population, a lot of young population coming out of colleges, and we are also getting in an environment where there is significant productivity benefits that are coming through, both in terms of the India productivity benefits, be it the India stack or all of the productivity measures that we have spoken about, as well as the disruption that's happening globally. So let me give you an example what I'm saying, right? So if let's say that there were, in the earlier, say, 10 years back or 15 years back, if somebody bought a truck and the truck is for, say, commercial transport of goods. Now, typically, you may have hired for each truck maybe four people to run it, to run it, and therefore every new truck would get you four new jobs. Right now, with the benefit of what we are seeing in terms of, say, productivity improvement, logistics, the faster transit times that are happening, potentially, for every new truck, maybe you may require only about three people new, because you are able to sweat that asset a lot better. Now, this is good for the balance sheets of the owners of capital. So if I'm a truck owner, this is wonderful news. But if I am an unemployed person who was looking for that job, this is basically not that great news. So I think when we are focused on productivity benefits in some sense are anti-growth, from a potential of hiring, of creating new jobs, etc. And so we need a balance, right? We can't go completely into a productivity benefit, nor can we go completely into providing jobs for everyone, because then we'll become completely uncompetitive. So I think therefore the nature of jobs that are coming in the gig economy, the nature of jobs that are coming in, say, the electronic manufacturing, which is a very low end job and from a value addition point of view, but it does take a significant amount of shadow labor, which is otherwise working in farms, into trying and making them slightly more productive. I mean, I know many people who have gone into, say, working for the Foxcons and the Apple factories, etc., in India, which are aspiring for better things. They start out at 18, 20, 22, and they're looking for something better in their career. So I think this is that virtuous cycle that we are getting to. Will this solve all our problems? The answer is no, because the sheer population base that we have and the youth that we have, I think there is always going to be a mismatch, and which is where, I guess cheaper telecom and data tariffs are in some ways keeping them occupied, so that they don't come onto the streets. But yeah, the reality is it's a very complex thing, and in all fairness, the government can do only so much. They can only catalyze. I mean, we are a small government at the end of the day, in the sense that government share of GDP is very small in India compared to many other parts of the world. But that's primarily because our tax revenues are lesser, not because the government doesn't want to become larger, and therefore they can only spend that much. It has to be the private sector, it has to be the newer jobs, self-employed, etc., that need to come through, that have to take up this thing. And so, yeah, there is no perfect answer that I can think of from a policy making or as an observer. But we'll have to make the most out of this.
Got it. And maybe, with private capex coming into light, I mean, as and when it comes, it may help the cause. So, Harish, since this discussion is primarily about fiscal, but it would not be prudent for us not to discuss the monetary side of it. And if we look at the picture right now, credit growth has been reducing for last few quarters now. So there was a time when deposit to credit ratio was looking very different, and now it's looking almost matching. We have a situation where we haven't had a rate cut for last 4 years. If we look at food inflation, we are not very comfortable there either. Now, government has announced its bazooka in terms of 1 lakh crore to boost consumption. Does the onus shift to RBI now in terms of propelling growth?
Absolutely. I think so. We think that there are three macro variables that can swing the sentiment and the direction of markets, say 6, 9 months down the line. First is, of course, the fiscal side, but the fiscal side was a very small, bullet to be fired, given the fact that, I mean, the options that were there for them has been very limited. So, in some sense, the fact that they've taken this tax break of 1 lakh crore is actually a step in that direction. But to be quite honest, I don't think I was expecting this in the first place, that they would actually forgo so much of revenues. So it is a welcome step. But the bigger lever that was to come through was on the monetary side, right? Now, monetary side is of two aspects, right? One is in terms of the rates itself. So that is one key policy angle that was there. Second was a whole range of measures that had got announced, say, in the last 18 months, which was signaling to various institutions to kind of, tighten themselves, tighten their credit standard, tighten their underwriting, or a potential increase in, say, norms of provisioning. You had the potential of, say, LDR, you had the potential of ECL norms, etc., coming through, which meant that the overall environment of lending had become slightly constrained. Right now, what we think is that there has been a change in governor. Okay. Typically, the first 6, 9 months of any new governor, especially if they come from the North Bloc, they tend to be a lot more growth focused than just macro stability focused. And therefore, we think that a bigger kind of a bullet is going to get fired on the monetary side. May not necessarily just be rates. It can be a whole range of policy signaling instruments that can get the job running, improving liquidity, trying and saying that one is more looking forward to a higher credit growth in ways that they can nudge. I mean, some of them are very public statements. Some of them can be, veiled references to get the message home. So I think the monetary side is where I would expect the biggest lever to come from over the course of the next 6, 9 months, as a big rate of change variable than what it was in the last 18 months. The third rate of change variable for the markets, to my mind, is the currency. Okay. Now, obviously, a depreciating currency during the phase of depreciation makes everyone worried, because especially for a foreign investor, which makes a 8-9% dollar returns, they don't want that to get further impacted because of currency, etc. So therefore, there is this phase of depreciation that leads people to panic. But once it settles down, okay, and we are not talking of very long, maybe under 3, 4, 5 months, as it settles down to whatever level, because it is also a function of what Trump is going to do with tariffs and how China is going to respond and etc. etc. Right? But post that, a depreciated currency is generally very positive for earnings growth. We are very geared towards dollar revenues in terms of top line. Almost 55% of the top 1,000 companies have got some linkages globally. And therefore, generally we've seen that a depreciated currency can potentially add 2 to 3% earnings growth in the subsequent 12 years once it stabilizes. So I think these are the three variables that to our mind can change quite dramatically over the course of the next 6, 9 months, of which monetary, of course, is going to be one of the biggest bullets from the arsenal of the policymakers that can make a big difference over the course of time.
So going by your statement, I think this Friday is going to be quite busy for all of us. So let's
Absolutely.
hope what you're saying pans out. So Harish, till now you have explained us the finer nuances of budget, the implication and all. And now coming to the actionable items. So as a fund manager, would you be realigning the portfolio basis this budget? Without getting into the specifics of the stocks, if you could give us an idea where all you will be adding position, which sector you would be reducing position basis this?
So yes, so there will be a small change in our portfolios given this. See, by and large, a lot of portfolios of the street, and I'm not only saying about us, but across the street, had moved more and more to investment as a theme at the expense of financials and consumption as they were going through their own set of challenges, right? We think that some of that can come back into equilibrium with money going back into consumption and financials. My own personal thought process is to move more into financials than into consumption, because the valuations of financials are a lot cheaper compared to what the consumption basket trades at. Secondly, like I said, yeah, my base view is that the bigger bazooka is going to come from the monetary side, and that, to my mind, is going to help the overall banking environment in terms of getting its mojo back in terms of credit, and with that, I think multiples can kind of get reversed because they've seen a big derating over the course of the last almost 12, 18 months, and therefore I would think that financials is the area that I would be further adding on post this budget. Consumption to a certain extent, yes, but I think the obvious choices of consumption may not necessarily be the ones like FMCG. Like I said, I don't really think that this is a budget that can solve for the FMCG problems. But can there be some benefit in consumer durables? Can there be some benefit in, say, liquor companies? Can there be some benefit in, say, travel, aviation, hotel, etc.? Those are the pockets that we would want to try and move some more marginal monies towards. So where are we going to fund this from? I think investment is one clear area where, though the budget is not necessarily anti-investment, like I said, I think portfolios have got a bit too geared towards that cycle. And so that will be one funding area that can come out from. The fourth is on the global cyclicals, which includes IT, pharma, metals, etc. I think that again, certain sectors have done very well in the last 6, 9 months. IT and pharma. Can that move into the global cyclicals of metals, chemicals, etc.? Is what we think, because we think that that's the phase that markets can eventually move towards. So that's our broad thinking. The second broad thinking that we have is that we think that there is going to be a change in sectoral leadership going forward. The last 18, 24 months, we had a particular set of names that were doing all the heavy lifting. We think that we're going to see a newer set of sector leaders come through, and therefore we are constantly evaluating what that framework can be, and which is where I think financials could be one, consumer durables could be under, global cyclicals like chemicals, metals, cement. Cement is of course local, but that could be the other pockets. You could even see something like an insurance, which has been on the back foot for some time. That could be another area that seems to be to us as very interesting. So that would be the areas that we would want to incrementally evaluate and further add to our positions.
So what I understand, Harish, is that even if we would have asked you this question a week back, maybe your answer would have been similar. So you are more of valuation-driven decisions. You're taking more of those decisions than taking decisions just on the basis of budget.
That's right. So I think the extent of the consumption boost, possibly I would not have really gone to that segment as much. I think at the margin that does get some benefit, but you're right. The slant of the portfolio had already started shifting even before the budget into the segments that I spoke about.
Right. So, Harish, now we are toward the end of our discussion, and there is one important point which I wanted to discuss for the understanding of our investor, and that is the finer prints of the budget, because devil is in the details, and the experience in last few budgets or last two budgets to be specific has not been very great for investors when they got into the fine prints of that. So, is there anything at this point of time in this budget, because it's been 2, 3 days now, which market is not factoring in or which media is not factoring in at this point of time, which you think our investors should be aware about, which is very, very important for them?
I think, see, we are all awaiting the direct tax bill because that is what the finance minister did say that she's going to table. And that is where all the fine print is going to reside in, right? Today, we have some understanding and assumption set. The reality is that the number of tax filers that are now going to pay the taxes is going to be less than maybe about 1 crore or 1.5 crore filers. So the burden of those tax revenues are going to fall on them. Today, it appears that they have also got some tax relief. Maybe I just hope it continues that way. But you never know, when that comes through, how it's going to be placed. In totality, they still have budgeted for a 14% increase in taxes. How that math is going to come through when a 1 lakh crore is going to get foregone. I think a lot of fine print may possibly come there. So I hope I'm not jinxing it, and I hope it's all good and there. But I think we'll have to wait out for that. Again, just before the budget session ends, we get to see some more nuances of the final finance bill that gets passed. That's the other time frame wherein something or the other keeps getting added, and that's where the next set. But having said that, to their credit, I think they've reasonably communicated their stance, over and over again. Of course, there's always a time when there is some googly or the other, but I would think that by and large, I would expect not too many surprises.
So in a way, Harish, you're saying that if you have saved money on taxes, don't go and spend as of now. Wait for a 15 days to 1 month period. So, with this, Harish, we come to the end of our conversation. It was quite enriching, and the best part is it was very brief because we have had con calls on budget for last 3, 4 days, and most of those dragged for 2 hours, 3 hours, and at times it becomes very boring and difficult for investors to understand. So, thank you for being concise, and thank you for taking us through the important variables which are there in this budget. I'm sure our investors would also learn a lot from this. Thank you for taking out time on a busy day. We understand that we are in the middle of a lot of events. We have monetary policy, we have daily election results, we have news flow from US on a daily basis, which keep you and us busy. And in all that mayhem, you took out time and addressed our questions. Thank you.
Appreciate this interaction. Thank you. Good day.